except for two spots where I had to stop drawing for a minute. This is all in real time. Now I thought this little, what do you call it? I think it's actually a gate post of some sort of decorative more than functional gate post, because there was another one next to it. But I thought this was a great little exercise in perspective drawing, because we have a lot of horizontal lines very close together in a 2-point perspective angle. So therefore there's going to be a lot of lines that as they go above eye level have to be slowly increasing, and as they go below eye level need to be slowly increasing in angle as well. And sometimes a subject which is quite modest in its overall appearance is actually a better perspective exercise than something larger and grander and more complex, because we really can focus on the perspective angles. And because there aren't a lot of details here, at the end, if our angles aren't quite right, they will stand out more, because we don't have the distraction of architectural elements and decoration, ornamentation, and so forth. And one thing I want you to notice is how right up until the very end, the very 11th and a half minute, I'm still making adjustments. I'm still slightly, as I think of it, massaging lines up or down just to tilt them a little more confidently into the place they need to be. And with a subject such as this, where we have layers on top of each other, and some of those layers create a slight shadow effect between them, that gives us a little more thickness to shift a line up or down. And you'll see me take full advantage of this, as I said, right up until the end, because once I've finished a section and I move on to another section, I keep looking back at what I've already done. Now, it's just a glance, but that glance is enough to see what's working and what's not, because often it's when I've drawn another part that the part that I've drawn earlier can be seen more precisely, because I've got something to reference it from. As my drawing extends, this doesn't happen quite as much, but at the very start particularly, I have to keep looking back at what I've done and what I'm doing now in order to get a good perception of both what I've done and what I'm doing now. It's a mistake to focus just on the part in the reference that I'm doing now and that part on the paper. I have to keep looking back over the whole thing in a cumulative sense as I grow. But this lets me place my later marks more confidently, more quickly, and so it's a great thing to do. It's part of the building rhythm, the natural tempo of any drawing. So the first thing I did with this, of course, was to try and work out eye level. Where is the place where we either have a horizontal line going across this whole gatepost, or where there would be a horizontal line if there were a horizontal structural line in this object. And it's pretty much where I started. It's at the top of that thicker collared section that protrudes out over the plinth. And so every horizontal line going down from that has to angle slightly more downwards, and the lines I do upwards have to angle slightly upwards, but not to nearly the same degree, because even the furthest line from eye level is still much, much closer to eye level than most of the horizontal lines in the downward direction. So it's not just that the angles have to increase, it's being aware of how much they have to increase. And one thing I always find very helpful at the start is to look at the extremes in any direction. So I look at the highest angle upwards and I think by the time I get to here, I have to spread this distance across the increase in angles, and the same with a downwards direction. So now I don't think I actually got lost, but now I'm trying to just count all the horizontal sections on the support for this round thing. It probably has a better term than round thing, but that will do for now. Sometimes an expression that everyone can understand is better than a more correct one that no one does. Now, that line is in the wrong place, and the second I put it, I knew it was in the wrong place. It wasn't high enough, and so now I go a little bit higher, and I don't do my best half circle curves, and I'm thinking, great. But again, watch at the end how I'm able to massage that silhouette and make it more circular, make it rounder. It's just as important to learn how to overcome initial inaccuracies in any way possible with any opportunity that's open to us as it is to draw them correctly in the first place. I'm sure I'm not as precise a drawer as people think, but I've learned how to make any marks and lines that aren't in the ideal spot look less significant, less important, how to use whatever opportunity the scene gives me to either cover my mistakes or partly cover them, or to distract attention elsewhere. Because remember, when someone looks at my drawing, they're not looking at an individual spot, they're looking at an overall effect. And so I can focus attention in the overall effect in a way to draw it away from particular parts that perhaps aren't what I want. And the darker background in this, the darker value of the green, even where it's in sunlight, but obviously where it's in shadow, is important in this. And so I'm just planning to do that at some point. So there's a fair bit of hatching. Remember, you're watching this in real time. It took me 11 and a half minutes. Actually, a little bit less probably, because I did take out probably 45 seconds where I stopped drawing a couple of times for different reasons. I'm using a 0.3mm pen, probably a little bit heavier than I would normally use, but I wanted this to stand out on the paper. And while I was aiming to draw this actual size, I've drawn it just a little bit larger, I think, but not a great deal. So again, these smaller exercises of relatively simple forms are also good for us working on our proportion skills, our ability to observe and to draw something in the same proportion. Whether I draw it the same size, larger or smaller, is not so important, but to keep the proportions the same. And we can learn more quickly by doing 5 small objects and paying close attention to these as we draw and then checking after we've drawn than one complex drawing. Because our learning cycle is shorter, we can have more of them in the same time as a long learning cycle involving a time-consuming drawing. That probably isn't actually worth that time, because we're still mastering the skills that we need to master to create the sort of drawing that we're really after, one that has the accuracy of realism to its reference in its proportions. So now I'm particularly slowing down a bit here and taking care, because this is where I want to correct some of the wobbliness in my orb, in my sphere. And so I don't want to mess up my second chance and end up with it looking worse than it looks at the beginning. Now, some of the distortion is because of the effect of the shadow, and I am bringing darker value up against where I'd put the shadow. So I have to make it quite a lot darker so that it stands separate visually from the horizontal hatching, just for that part of the sphere that's in the shade, that's catching shade. And I'm trying to do a bit of hatching here that is lighter than what I've done on the right hand side. It's really important doing hatching in a place such as this to not let the hatch lines carelessly lose control and to go onto the white paper that is part of the plinth that this sphere sits on, because that will really interfere visually with the silhouette and with the cleanness and the separation of foreground from background. It suddenly won't pop out as clearly. So one way to do this, and you'll see me do it a couple of times in this, is to actually start our hatch lines not at the top down, but at the bottom where it meets the plinth upwards. When I have no line I have to end the hatch in the upward direction, then I'm better off starting at the downward part and moving upwards. It's a different feel. It actually produces a different line. But if we're aware of that, we can compensate for it to have the overall hatching all harmonious and together. This is a great subject for a quick exercise, or this part of a larger subject to be done is a great way to go also for a daily exercise. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I hope you hit the like button for me if you found this interesting, and of course you can have a go drawing this yourself. I will post this reference photo on my channel community page and you can screenshot and print off a copy yourself there. But be on the lookout when you're walking around the streets for small objects such as this. Whip your phone out, take a photo and go home and spend 10 to 15 minutes doing a practice and really focusing on one element of drawing technique. When you do that, it's always good to have a focus when we're doing a drawing exercise. But look, in the end, whatever you draw, however you draw it, whatever focus you do or don't have, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.